Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Michele Cobb. I'm Executive Director of the Podcast Academy, and I'm here with Andrea Kwamya, who is founder and a consumer insights consultant. And this is very exciting because we like to partner with different organizations. She's from Podbreak, and she can tell you all about that and what we're here to talk about today. It's all you.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Michele. Hi, everybody. As Michele said, I'm Andrea Kwamya, and I've had a lot of experience in my career with consumer insights. I'm an ex-Spotifyer, and recently I partnered with a fellow entrepreneur, Nose Yare, and we started an organization called Podbreak, where we focus on giving support and creating community for African podcasters of the diaspora. And one of the main things that came up in our journey is this idea of Podfade. And this has happened to me, so I thought it was a relevant topic that many podcasters often deal with and struggle with. But Michele and I are going to first talk about what is Podfade, how does it affect us as podcasters, whether you're new or whether you've had an existing show, and ways that we can ensure that our shows have lasting resonance and consistency, but while we're still able to have fun as we build our audiences, as we build those shows. So I'm really excited to be here and to partner with the Podcast Academy.
Sure. Yes. So have you experienced Podfade? Tell us what you view Podfade to be.
Sure. So on top of experiencing it and doing a lot of research, so Podfade is that experience where your show's going really well, you're getting a lot of traction, or maybe you're even in the beginning throes of it, and then slowly you notice that the episodes are slowing down, or maybe your listeners are noticing that they're seeing you less and less. And there could be many reasons for why this happens, but you just notice that you've lost your cadence, you've lost your traction. And because Michele is an expert in podcasting, I thought it would be great for us to talk about some of the reasons that might happen, and so that people don't feel a level of shame and that they can know that it's possible to recover from it. And so if you've ever experienced that, feel free to comment about it or ask us any questions as we go along, because we'll be answering them towards the end. Yeah.
And one thing I have to say, I've noticed recently, and maybe you have as well, it seems like some high profile podcasters who have been doing this for a long time are actually experiencing that Podfade. They've been doing this for years and years, and they're saying, I need to take a break, or I need to switch to a different podcast, or I need to stop podcasting altogether. And I think that we should acknowledge that this happens at the hobbyist level, and it happens at the level of people who've been doing this every day for a long time. We can all get tired of doing the same thing, or tired of hearing ourselves talk, right?
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. We should find ways to work through it and to acknowledge that we all need a break.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even for me, when I first experienced it, I was really trying to figure out what is the trigger point, and I had been changing a lot of things in my career, moving, and even the podcasting was like my one major joy. I think it was even harder for me to recognize and reconcile with the fact that, like, this is the one thing that's bringing me joy, and I'm slowly letting it fall to the wayside. And the other thing that can happen psychologically is also when you have quick and early success, there's also a fear of growth as well. And I think it's something we don't talk about.
That's something I think I see across different industries, because I work in podcasting, I also work in audiobooks and publishing. And it's something I especially see with women, where we don't necessarily want to have the conversation and want to admit that maybe we need to slow down on some level.
Right.
Maybe it's just that, maybe it's not gender-based at all, but that the women I know talk about it more, especially since the pandemic. So Maybe
Right.
there's a positive to the pandemic where we're talking about certain issues more. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think so. When I during the pandemic, I had a lot more time to podcast during what would be like the golden hours of silence, which is like nighttime, and I would put in those late hours doing my last minute editing. But over time, like even that becomes unsustainable. So it's also this idea of like, do you need help? What are the trigger points, like I said, that are causing your hesitation? And I'll just say it. Oftentimes, Podfade is coming from an anxiety, like a feeling of overwhelm. A lot
Yes.
of the articles and videos I watched about it they use the term being overwhelmed, and you might even know what your show is about. Yeah, Lily, exactly, and burnout. So the idea that you can still burn out from something that is really exciting to you, and in the beginning. So I want to ask you, Michele, like if you have seen any case studies of people who have maybe slowed down but found a way to sort of you know connect with their audience and let them know, because there's also this fear of like expectation that, oh, we're not doing our shows perfectly. And I think there is some perfectionism in the podcasting space as well.
Yeah, I think it's multi-layered. So you've got the issue of perfection, right? I'm a Virgo. I want to be perfect in everything I do. It's not possible, right? So some of it is you have to acknowledge what the issues are and kind of let them go. And I think a lot of it is about doing the basic things as part of your podcast that allow you to connect with the audience beyond what's in your RSS feed. So do you have a newsletter? Do you have social media? And can you alert people, not just in the RSS feed, but in your kind of footprint that you are taking a break? And I certainly recommend that people be very specific about what they think that break will be, because the audience, all of our audiences have an expectation on this is when we're going to deliver things. But I don't think any audience member would be so unkind to say, like, I'm never going to listen to you again because you took a month off. So I think a lot of it, this is day-to-day work beyond podcasting, in podcasting, is communications. So let people know that you have this plan, and don't hide it. Don't be afraid to share that plan.
Yeah.
I work on a podcast. I'm an executive director of a podcast called Stories of Impact, and we are supposed to release an episode today. We have a staff member who, she and her family have been dealing with COVID, and she was like, I just can't get it done. It's like, you know what? It's okay. We know we're going to release it a week late. I don't think that there's anything that we need to tell anyone with just a week. And also, we're going to just let it go. We're going to say,
Yeah.
okay, we need that extra week. We're going to produce a great product. We're going to bring it up next Tuesday.
Right.
And, no one is going to come after us with pitchforks, really. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's encouraging to know as well. And so technically, I read that technically to be considered inactive means you haven't posted it within 90 days. So
Yes.
that could even be like a psychological trick to be like, if you've missed your window, that within 90 days, that's usually the area where your audience will have a layer of, it's not even only being forgiving, but they'll like remember you within this time frame. They won't forget about you. But past that, they might forget about you, and they won't have hard feelings, but they just might be like, oh, that show isn't around anymore. But I think even that gives you a lot of opportunities if you are on the end of being mildly forgotten. So I want to ask you about that. So I've read some articles that people have different ways of planning, of coming up with content once they've become secure in their process. And we can even talk about if someone doesn't feel secure, they're still confused. But right now, in terms of if you have a system and a cadence, that there are different ways to approach that. And I've seen batching, or if you're not able to yet outsource or have a partner or a team, saying that you're going to move to seasons, or even doing bonus episodes when you need a break from full production. What are your opinions on those styles of sort of planning? Is there one you prefer, or some that you've seen work better than others?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to, I'm a Virgo, so I like to be ahead of the game, right? So, they tell you when you start a podcast, you should have a few episodes in the can, as it were, and maybe launch, with 2 or 3 right away. I'm the same for every season and for every break. So when I'm planning, what I would like to do is have 3 to 5 episodes ready to go before I'm launching the next season, or the next podcast, whatever it is. I've just got a little bit of a cushion, and then try to be clear with what the season is going to entail. So is this going to be 7 episodes across 2 months, and then we're going to take a break? Like, trying to lay those things down up front. And if you can't, you pop in a short, just like a trailer, you pop in a minute piece into your feed and say, here are our plans for moving forward. Here's our plans for the break. And it doesn't have to, the good news is it doesn't have to destroy your subscribership by any means. The podcast that I do the most work on, we're funded by a grant, right? So you don't always know when that next grant is going to come in. So we ended sort of abruptly in our last season, and took a long break. And as soon as we knew what we were going to be doing and that we had been funded for the next season, we popped in and said, here's the plan, here's when we're coming back. And you have to build some of that audience back, but it didn't destroy us. And we just, again, tried not to hold on to it. It's like, we've got to take this break because we don't know what's going on with the funding, and we're going to be okay with it. And we're going to tell our audience what we know, and they're going to be okay with it too.
Right. I think to your point about not losing the audience, one thing about podcasts that are so incredible is the idea that we're telling stories that are evergreen, they're lasting, right? So you're going to build new listenership and new fans, months down the line, later than your actual published date. And I think that creates a multitude of opportunities, especially for independent podcasters. And especially, I want to go back to sort of, so I'm a Gemini. I'm not as organized as the Virgo groups.
Sorry, it's just me and my own brand of crazy,
It's wonderful. I think it's really great, but I know that oh, thank you. I'm a Gemini with an actual twin, so we enjoyed.
Wow.
I know, what a mess. So I think when we do look at our early beginnings, a lot of us, and I'll include myself, we started with this like big idea. So I actually, my podcast is called The Only Black Girl on Mars. It was a very literal term that came from a job that I had where I was on a team called Mars. And so that's how it came about, marketing science. And I had this idea in 2017, but when I got the urge to do it, there's kind of like this adrenaline to getting started where you're like, I just have to do it or I won't do it, and that can help people get their beginnings, but then you're backtracking to do the scheduling. So as someone who's really organized, have you ever worked with anyone or spoken to anybody who needed to figure out what is the best way that they can get their show on a consistent calendar, or making sure that their calendar schedule is following the needs of their niche?
Yeah, I think what I see a lot is trial and error. Because so when you start something, you think you have an idea of what it will take, and oftentimes that doesn't match the reality of the situation. So, I encourage people when they're starting out, think about doing a limited number, right? So you're going to do 8 episodes, you're setting it up that way, and then that's manageable, and you can learn something through that process of doing those 8 episodes, and then kind of reconfigure to say, okay, this wasn't working for me. I need more help with editing. I need, someone who can give me some better ideas on equipment. As you're going through the process of doing, you're actually figuring out what you don't know. And
Right.
that's where you can go and get those tips and go and get more information. And if you've set it up for your audience that you're going to start in this way, then when you are ready to do the next iteration, you have all of those learnings, you have all of that information, and you have failures. Because you know what? We learn most, I find, from when we make a mistake, when we make a failure. We just have to be sure not to dwell on that.
Right.
But that's how we learn. So don't be afraid to, screw up, essentially.
Yeah,
Own
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, I think, and even in addition to that, and I completely agree with that advice, is also asking for support. So, like I
Yes.
said, we've built Podbreak as this collective community. And as I was thinking about this topic, I went into the group and I told everyone, guys, I'm dealing with this anxiety around republishing. I don't know what it is. Like, what's your advice? Has anyone gone through it? And everyone listed amazing ideas and support. And sometimes that's all you need, is just like a little bit of boost of validation to remind you that you're not the only one. There are millions of people producing podcasts out there. But it is a reality that 75+% of us are not continuing with our shows because people don't know what to do next. And just for the group, for the listeners, I've spoken to a lot of podcasters who have shows that have existed for years and they don't really know how to take it to the next level. And one thing that I've always done is like, I've just gone back to my like biggest fans, and that could even be friends and family. And even if I just need someone to listen to a show, it is always such a great way to just remind yourself, like, someone is interested and is waiting for your story. And that's one thing that has always sort of given me this reminder, like, yes, people are waiting for your stories. They're waiting to hear from you. And that should be such a great feeling for you to realize that your messages are very important.
Yeah, and I think that, it's a great time. I encourage people to join the Podcast Academy. We do have some sponsored memberships for a year. And one of the things you can do is get a mentor. So find someone, and it doesn't have to be through TPA, but find someone else who is podcasting, who's at a different stage than you are, and try to learn from them. If you're trying to take your podcast to the next level, and that level means getting a certain number of downloads, or it means expanding your footprint, try to find someone who is at that next level and see if they will spend a little time talking to you about what tools they used and what they did to hit that next stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's I really, really, really resonate with this. I don't have a podcast mentor yet, but I have joined the Podcast Academy, and I can just translate this from business mentorship into this, because it is your small business. It might not be making money now, and hopefully in the beginning, if that's what you want to do, but it is your small business. It is something that in the early stages, you're seeing production through from beginning to end. And most of us excel once we have worked with someone, or someone can guide us who has seen success themselves and can sort of help be a guidepost through those the ebbs and flows, so to speak.
Well, and what I find about podcasters is they're so collegial.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you build your community, you might not even be talking about your podcast, but you're hearing someone talk about their podcast and their troubles and their successes. And you can learn from that and start to build your community, and people will help kind of guide you towards other people who are in the same space or a slightly different space who can provide support. when I started podcasting, I didn't know that I would need to regularly talk to someone who sells advertising, right? That's
None of us
okay.
do.
Yeah. Great. So, that's one of the things I like about TPA is I can meet people that sell advertising in the same space as I can meet someone who's doing this as a hobby. And
Yeah,
you are really coming into a strangely diverse community of people that are hobbyists, of people that are professionals, and of people that have never been involved in a podcast production at all. And so
right.
all those different perspectives give you lots of points of learning and lots of points of guidance.
Great. Well, I wanna still in the same realm, but switching gears a little bit to talk about how Podfade and podcasting is related to mental health. Because like we said, podcasting for many of us started out as a passion, and it could have even been sort of a way to release tension or just to feel good about ourselves and something that we care about outside of our daily lives. And so if it gets to the point that you are experiencing pod fade, maybe that means there's a little bit of pressure on you. You're putting a little bit of pressure on yourself that doesn't need to be there. So I want us to sort of talk about how we can ensure that, the shows that we're doing, apart from those that we're doing specifically for businesses, but our personal shows, that we can maintain fun, or that we can ensure that the topic we're choosing is something that we know is going to be a passion that we can sustain.
Well, I think, you can look around your life and say, these are the things that I'm passionate about, and you can pick those. I think the danger does become sometimes when you're doing something like a podcast on something you're passionate about, it can become work, right?
Right.
So suddenly it's less of a passion on
Yes.
some level. So I think a lot of it has to do with, being unafraid to pivot, go do an episode on something that's slightly different. That can refresh you, how you're feeling. Do all of those things that work for you and your own personal mental health. It's only, I think, in the past couple of years, we've started to talk about self-care. And I don't think any of us can say enough about it. Self-care for every single person is different. And you have to figure out what works for you and apply that in a business situation, in a personal situation, and in your podcast situation. And, don't be afraid to mix it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you made a joke about listening to your own voice, and I actually have a small anxiety sometimes around just doing the playback or just hitting the button. And I don't know how many other people have ever experienced this, but especially if you're doing your own production, editing, everything. And there have been days where I'm just like, I'm just not ready to hear my voice today.
Yeah.
Yes, Uchi, it will be shared following this presentation. Thank you for asking. But yes, I've had moments where I'm just like, I just can't sit and listen to myself at 10 p.m. today. And then once you hit the play button, you're like, oh wow, like this was a great conversation. Like, oh, I forgot what wonderful insights we had talking about this. And I think it's also, for me, in terms of remembering the passion points of podcasting, is like you started telling stories about something that interested you so you could connect to other people. So when you sit down, you should also be able to enjoy your show. You should also be able to like hear yourself and be like, wow, I think that if I were listening for the first time, that I would gain a lot. And sometimes I've had an episode, this was before, right when people started working from home, I interviewed an Amex executive on her thoughts about remote working because she had been doing it for years. And I remember I re-listened to it one time because I had some project that I had to do around remote work. And I was like, oh yeah, because she had a lot of great tips and things to say. So I think it's something that everyone should be really proud of their work. And And also in terms of, mental health and like you said, being okay to pivot, but also we're talking about Podfade, but I don't want us anyone to see it as a negative thing. Like Michele said, if you know that you need a break, I think that's time for you to be honest with yourself, but also know that you can be honest with your audience. Like, I need a break. I don't know what it's going to look like when I come back, or maybe you do. And just to be honest with yourself that that's okay. And, the next steps will come when you're ready.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a good question in the Q&A box, which I think kind of bleeds into this.
Mm-hmm.
So someone is asking, what do you do when you've had a great podcast session one day with the subject that fires your audience up, but the next time it sort of falls flat, right? And that falling flat or that feeling of, ooh, it didn't go so well, can sort of lead into pod fade, I find. If people
Right.
are, even if it's just one episode, you feel like, oh, that wasn't the best episode I did. And there becomes like a little bit of fear maybe to do that next episode. So, I think there's a couple of things that I would suggest. First of all, turn to your audience and, ask them what they liked about the episode that did really well, right? You can ask on social, you can ask in an email, and let them, provide you with a little bit of bolstering about what they liked so much about that one particular episode, and use that information to help you as you build the next one. And also just don't dwell. So
Right.
it's the biggest lesson, so what if an episode wasn't as good as the last one? Not everyone is going to be equal, and just try not to dwell on it.
After this, everyone should have a sign in their studios that says "Don't dwell," because Michele is really trying to get us to understand, and I really agree with her. I think in addition to what Michele said, I've had episodes that I thought weren't great, in my opinion. For myself, I didn't think they were great, and then I get a phone call that'd be like, oh, I never thought about this that way, and for my listener, they valued something in it that I was like thinking about the sound, or like, oh, maybe it wasn't as funny, things like that, when maybe for them, maybe if the tone was different, it's still connected to someone. And I think it comes
Exactly.
down to, like, are you trying to go for a very specific, like super super niche tone that will always only hit the same time, or is it okay for you that you're going to be providing something a little bit new each time, and that could even be of value to you? You're going to get different, with different approaches, you're going to get different people, and I think in addition to this, it's just like, when I have the days that I think are flat, I go through and I try and find like that one exciting piece, because like, I think even in a 30-minute to an hour episode, there's going to be at least 5 minutes of content that was fun, at least for a few seconds, and just finding that and making a clip of that, it feels so good. It's a fun way to sort of get your audience to even still have some interest in the topic. Or if you just think there was one core insight, you just share that on your social media, and you can still feel proud about what you published.
Well, and think about some of the biggest podcasts in the world, right? You got Joe Rogan, you got the Daily with Michael Barbaro. You think every episode is, the best episode they've ever done? No,
Yeah.
there's a whole variety. So you're in good company, that's for
Yes.
sure.
Yes. In any of the things you're feeling subconscious about, you're not alone. That's the main point of this.
And Lily actually put in the Q&A, she's wondering if Podfade is more normal for those who struggle with the two things that we spend a lot of time talking about in podcasting: listenership and monetization.
Mm.
And I mean, I would say there's twofold, right? Yes, when you're struggling with listenership and monetization, that's always going to be a stressor. Absolutely. But I also think that a lot of people who are struggling with that are the one-man bands, right? So they're having to do everything. And if you can find a way to kind of, spread a little of that pain, that will certainly help with the Podfade. So, and your own confidence,
Right.
just even if it's hiring an editor for one episode to give yourself a little bit of a break. I think that's there. But I also think, I'm seeing it more and more right now. People who have been in big podcasts are stepping back, and they've been doing it for a long time. I don't think anyone, if we're human, can do the same thing forever. Many people in the generations who are older than us stayed in a job for a long time and did something very similar. But that isn't the way that the younger generations are moving and working. People are changing stuff up, changing jobs more often, trying new things, having a hobby like this, which is essentially another job. So I think that, we have to recognize that we're not necessarily built to do the same thing every day in the same way. And just find some tricks that can help you, whether it be another person participating, whether it be, taking a break. Find the tricks that work for you to make, when you're doing it, just, an awesome thing, but not necessarily, but don't get down on yourself.
Right, right. And I even in regards to that, of doing something repetitive, you're also sharing so much energy. If you're a podcaster that has guests, or even with a partner, it's a lot of social energy that you're doing on top of your day to day. And so statistically, it just says across the board 75%. So let's say, maybe that makes sense. Maybe a small percentage of the group that is podcasting does have support and finances. And then there's the second subset that has a really great structure. And I think what happens, in my opinion, and just from watching and researching, is there aren't many conversations on, is it okay to just come back? Like, I think it's okay to just say, like, oh, I disappeared and I'm just going to pop up again. And no one's going to know the wiser, or if you want to share more. So statistically, yes, but I think I'm really glad that you brought this up, because what I would love, and one of Nosa and my vision, is that podcasters who do want to survive, that there's more monetization and access available. That a lot of podcasters of color and Black creatives in general do not get that support. They're much less likely to receive financial support, and although there are grants out there, it's like, do you have them in front of you? Do you have, are you being sent those opportunities? Is it in the arena that you would even be able to see that these grants are available? So these are all things that tie into each other. But like Michele had said, at the end of the day, it's knowing your limits, and knowing that it's all normal. Like, we're not all machines that are meant to have a conversation, then listen to it again, then clean it up, then say something else, like it's a process.
The good news on monetization is a lot of the independent podcaster hosting platforms like Libsyn and those other platforms are starting to add an opportunity for people to get monetization. And even if it's on a low level to start, it can be a way for you to tap into some potential funding.
Right. And also the perfectionism. Like, I think one of my biggest fears early on, because my podcast was my baby, was like, okay, but they're not going to know exactly how I like it edited. And now I'm like, take it. I have things to, like, and that's a transition as well. And that comes with learning how to communicate what your vision is, and also putting trust in someone else, and knowing that will also be trial and error, because you might land with an editor that isn't your vibe at first, or you could get lucky the first time. So yeah,
that totally makes sense. Trial and error. We're trying things, we're letting stuff go, Someone said, this is great life advice. Yes, we're just applying our own life advice to podcasting. That's what I find.
Yes. So in terms of social support and just supporting podcasters of color, I know that the Podcast Academy does a lot of stuff related to that.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and sort of what your ideology is around supporting podcasters of color?
Absolutely. So we're very lucky in that Spotify has allowed us to sponsor a number of independent podcasters from underrepresented communities. So I put the link in the chat, and you can find it on the podcastacademy.com. Go to the join page, just scroll down and apply for a free membership. And everything that we do, we're thinking about trying to reach the widest number of people and to have the widest number of voices involved. So, obviously getting people who are from underrepresented populations to join, that's the first step. And then making sure that we're programming, that we have a wide variety of programming. We've done a number of things on monetization and marketing recently, which are all recorded and available in the back end. So even if you join now, you can have access to those things. We have a mentorship program that we are definitely trying to, find people from different walks of life to come in and provide their advice. And, I keep forgetting because we're not at the Ambies yet, but if you get a scholarship, a sponsored membership to TPA, in September, you'll actually be able to submit something for the Ambies for free. So the Ambies are the awards. And when you become a member of the community, we actually invite people to become what we call a blue ribbon panelist for the Ambies, so that when we have the first round of judging, which gets us down to the nominees, 7 nominees in each category, we don't have 2 people from the same walk of life judging anything. And we have seen, some good diversity in terms of our nominees, and that's because the community is diverse, and we're ensuring that the people who are going through those rounds of listening are diverse as well. And our hope is just that we'll continue to build podcast potential leaders that are diverse in many, many different ways. And that can mean anything from, skin color to your political views. Conservative people are involved too, and liberal people are involved, and people from international communities. There's a whole different range of diversities that we want to make sure that come into the community, because all those different voices in the mix are important to building leadership that is representative of being able to have conversations with people that are different than you, and being able to guide people that are different than you, and then hoping that you will sort of pay it forward and continue to do what has been done for you, be a mentor, be a listener, be a judge, all those different things. So, when we built the Academy, we were thinking with, DEI in mind, and we continue to think with that, but it's really all up to the members. Run for the board too. You can,
No, we love to hear that, because that's such a generous offering, and it also touches upon the importance of, membership, community, and these are the ways that the more opportunities there are that are inclusionary, that people will be able to see what's available. Maybe there are some podcasters who didn't know there was a podcast award, and through this program you can learn more about what's out there and what the opportunities are. So we're really excited about it. If you are new and are just hearing about Podbreak, the organization that I've started with Nose Yare, who's in the chat, anybody who is an African podcaster that joins our membership will also be eligible to partner with the Podcast Academy and get a scholarship through them. So we're really grateful for the support that they've shown us as well. for sure.
Yeah, and about 17% of our members are outside the US. So, we would love to grow that number. So, don't be shy, pass it on. You can pass that link on.
Yes. So I think I know we still have a little bit of time, but I don't know if you feel the same, Michelle, if I've missed anything or if we can open it up to questions. And I think Nosa will also put the link to our website and our event. Which I will talk about really briefly.
Please.
Yeah, so we started Podbreak, like I said, with this idea that, without even thinking about Podfade, we all have jobs. We're also podcasting. Podcasters need a break too. We need community. And there's something really unique and interesting about being an African podcaster, because storytelling is part of our DNA. It's woven within our culture. This idea that even through music and drumming, you're communicating with neighboring tribes and cultures and communities, and there's this culture of really sitting down and sharing history through storytelling. And I know it's not unique to just our cultures, but when you are, whether you're first generation or new to the States or any other country outside of your own home, there's this way of seeing life where you're like the dual culture kid, a triculture kid, and a lot of us that have come together have resonated in that. And just knowing that the support is limited, and that of course there are groups like the Podcast Academy, but that many times we have to build ourselves up. We have to pick each other up in order to help get ourselves to that, to our goal line, and that's okay, and that there's strength in that. So this year we're putting on our first event, Podbreak 2022, where we're meeting in Chicago, and the idea is that the podcasters of the group will come. It's about celebrating the work we've done, but we're also going to be co-creating a lot of episodes, and just learning from each other. And this is our inaugural event, and we're hoping to do this regularly every year, a new location as we go through. And if you go to the website, you can learn more about how to join, if it's relevant to you, or how to support and donate us. But we're really welcoming an open group, and we're always happy to speak to anyone who is interested in what we're doing. So, yeah.
Well, we're really thrilled to have been able to partner with you today, and we're, pulling for you on your Chicago event.
Thank you. It's so soon, but we're ready. So I'd love to open it up to any questions, comments. If you guys have tips for anyone else that's in the group, like we said, this is going to be recorded. So, if it just know that it's going to be seen by other people. So if you have anything that you'd like to say, now is the time, and we always appreciate your thoughts.
This is where I want to sing the Jeopardy theme song or something. Give people time to think of their questions.
Let me just plug in my laptop before it dies on.
Isn't that our lives now? It's like, wait, do I have the internet? Am I plugged in?
Yes, I mean, I'm a remote worker, so I travel and work from wherever I am. So it's always an adventure. Like I'm in New York now. Maybe tomorrow I'll be in Florida, then Chicago. But it has its challenges, but it's also very freeing when things work.
Absolutely. You should get to explore the world. And I've worked remotely for a long time, so I hear about people and I see people going back to offices, and I think, wow, I can't believe we're going back to that.
Right.
On my laptop.
That's the strange part now. People are working in buildings, huh? Well, yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Is the membership in the academy also for newbies to podcasting, or do I need to be established?
You just need to show us what you're doing in podcasting. You can be on your first podcast. You can be leading up to it. You'll need a reference. If it's easiest if you just give us a link to your podcast and we can see exactly what you're doing. But oftentimes someone isn't a podcast creator. So show us on your LinkedIn, give us a reference for someone in the Podcast Academy who can vouch for that you are doing something in podcasting. And yes, you're welcome to join the community. Come and learn.
Great question. Anyone else?
Thank you, Nosa. It says in the chat, TPA stands for terrific, positive, and awesome. There you go. Oh, here's a good question.
Yeah.
Do you foresee platforms like Spotify having exclusive deals with African podcasts anytime soon?
Mm-hmm. This is a wonderful question. And so although I am not at Spotify anymore, they have been taking many steps to sort of put a bigger spotlight on African creators. And I'm proud to say I've worked with many of the people that have been spearheading that team. And the last 2 years, they've actually started hiring leads out in sub-Saharan Africa, and that is really making a difference. So last year they had a fund for about, I think it was $10 million to disperse to African creators, and that was podcasters included. The only thing about many businesses, especially bigger businesses, is that they have their budgets really early. They have them allocated. So the best way for us to sort of get in front of them is just to keep helping each other build up, so that when those opportunities come, we can be, one of the first people in, and also just creating those networks and networking. So right now, even Nosa and I have been, reaching out to Spotify, seeing what we can do to work together. And, maybe this year we'll see what happens, but who knows, if not this year, we just have to keep trying, because more companies are seeing the value in, a $3 billion industry. Like they're leaving us out of the equation, but we would only benefit to have people who look like us speak to us. Great question as well. Awesome. Well,
great. Well, I think that, we all get a few minutes back to our day. We've said what we need to say, and that's fantastic. Oh, of course, you give people time, and then the question comes in. Oh, here's a good one. Do you think women-led podcasts are underappreciated, and how can that change?
Oh, do you want to take this one, Michelle?
I think, I think that is changing. A lot of what I'm seeing and hearing from podcasts today, and maybe it's just because I'm the audience, but I gravitate towards a lot of podcasts that are led by women, and I'm seeing a lot more podcasts led by women, even if they are not necessarily the host. The production team is female-led. So I think, when I look around at the executives at a lot of these groups, I'm talking to and dealing with a lot of women. So I think we're getting in there. Is there room to grow? Absolutely. But I feel very good about, this being an industry that is heavily led by women.
Right. And I would agree in that, because over the course of the last few years, as everyone was staying at home and remote, the percentage and uptick of women who started their own small businesses and also starting podcasts has really led to a factor of growth in terms of having female voices coming into the fold. In terms of support, we'll have to wait and see, but I think it starts with the listenership. It starts with the audiences and what they're asking for. So the more people have things to say about, positive things to say about female hosts and producers, then the more support we'll see, in my opinion, but time will tell.
I would agree. I mean, you can't hold women down though. We're out there.
We are out here.